This video might be a little normie friendly, but seriously, it still baffles me that the food pyramid as it is currently depicted is still being taught in schools to this day, right? It is quite literally the definition of a peasant slave's diet. The base of the pyramid, the most important building blocks, according to these people, according to these experts, is grains, is bread, is pasta, is all of these different things. And this is what the
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of the food pyramid. The new one is even worse, but I'm also not a fan of the previous one. I don't like how they put refined grains, for example, bread, white rice, at the base of the pyramid. That doesn't make any sense to me. And yeah, I'm not the biggest fan overall.
experts with degrees, with authority are going to tell you. But when you think about it for 2 seconds, once you can actually rub even just 2 brain cells together, you understand that, well, what is contained in grains, what is contained in bread? It is completely devoid of any valuable nutrition. It contains 10 times more gluten due to modern hybridization.
Gluten is fine for 99% of people.
Gluten being an indigestible molecule.
It is digestible for 99% of people. Only 1% cannot digest it.
It completely wreaks havoc on people's gut health nowadays. Even if you don't have celiac disease, gluten is still destroying you one way or another. It's one of the biggest causes of hair loss. And all of these grain-based products are sprayed with glyphosate Roundup, which is one of the most toxic pesticides that can be found on Earth. So if the base of your diet is grain,
it kind of depends on how much, because if it's 1 gram or if it's 0.0001 gram, like there's a certain amount that is negligible and it's not going to impact you. But yeah, I guess he has a point.
Right? If that's the most important thing, it's basically over for you. And then you've got vegetables, which are prized for how important they are. But again, once you think about it for 2 seconds, again, this is not a conspiracy theory.
Yes, it is.
It falls apart, because what do vegetables contain? As far as nutrition that you need. Vegetables don't contain anything that you need that animal products don't contain, plus the fact that vegetables contain oxalates, lectins, phytates, and
I mean, this image is kind of funny. I mean, people that eat more vegetables, they live longer. They have better biomarkers, they have better lipid profiles. And I'm not saying that as someone who's biased. I don't like eating vegetables. I would much rather eat fruits, for example, or other stuff. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of the flavor of vegetables, but I still recognize that they're healthy. And good luck trying to get 100% of all the RDIs if you don't eat any vegetables. Because you cannot eat liver because you might get vitamin A toxicity and too much copper. And multivitamins are kind of useless because the studies show they're pretty much neutral when it comes to health. So you have to get your macronutrients, and it's pretty difficult to get it without vegetables. And yeah, liver is not the solution because it has too much of certain nutrients, especially dietary cholesterol, and of course copper and vitamin A.
other harmful compounds that prevent the bioavailability of any kind of positive nutrition that you might be getting. Same thing for their incomplete proteins, right? 1 gram of protein from fruit and vegetables is not the same thing as 1 gram of protein. One is an incomplete protein, one is a complete protein. And you need all of these building blocks, all of these amino.
It's pretty easy to get all the amino acids. This would only be true if you're eating bananas all day or only fruits all day, which some people do, but you know, most people don't. And it's, again, really easy to get enough protein and get all the amino acids.
Acids which compose that gram of protein in order to function optimally as a human being. And then the least important food group is animal products. Oh yeah, you should eat them in moderation.
No, the least important is ultra processed stuff. So stuff with trans fats. For example, fried in oil at high temperatures. That would be the worst. In fact, there are studies where, for example, they can put animal products as being positive for health, but that's because they're comparing them with trans fats. So it's the worst thing you can consume. It's the most pro-inflammatory.
What do you mean moderation?
Yeah, I don't like the word moderation because it means something different to everyone.
our ancestors for the majority of the length of the existence of their genetic code,
Holy cortisol.
what did they eat during the Ice Age? What was consumed by your genetic code for 19...
Oh, and by the way, during the Ice Age, we had plants. Only certain areas we didn't have access to plants or very little access, but of course there were plants, otherwise plants wouldn't be alive today. They had to survive during the Ice Age. And a lot of humans did consume plant foods during the Ice Age.
9% of its existence. Animal products, meat, eggs, dairy.
Just because we do something for a long time doesn't mean we get adapted to it, because you cannot drink untreated water, especially if it's a still water source. So if it's a river, it's always flowing. That may be different because it's always changing, but if it's a lake, if it's a still water source and the water is not treated, you cannot drink it. It's too dangerous. That's how a lot of people died back then. That's a big reason why child mortality rate was so high for a lot of human history.
Fish.
So we have adapted, but very little, not even close to being fully adapted. And we still cannot drink untreated water from especially still sources, just because we have been exposed to something that doesn't necessarily imply adaptation.
Some fruits seasonally. Nobody was turning seeds into sludge to make up grain-based products. Nobody was doing any of that crap. Oh, but our ancestors lived until 25. Yeah, it's because of infant mortality. That's because the conditions of life were much tougher at the time. That's because people rarely even died of old age in the survival era. But they were infinitely healthier than us and had infinitely higher amounts of vitality and more dimorphic skulls. Even nowadays, you can see the difference between men who grew up in the 1900s versus men growing up today. Today, all you get is malformities, facial malformities, because of these garbage diets.
True. Probably the primary reason is because food was way tougher before. And right now everything is ultra processed. So for example, when I was a kid, I didn't develop correctly. A big reason was because all I ate was slop. It was just stuff that was already pre-processed, pre-chewed basically. Because when you're eating bread, white bread for example, it's already pre-chewed. Your masseters are not going to do any effort. And you're not going to have the pressures that basically expand your palate during development and that increase forward growth. So he is correct. He's not explaining why, but it is true that we have worse development nowadays of our skulls.
All you get is premature hair loss because of these garbage diets and this.
It is also true that junk food increases the speed of hair loss. And we do see that, for example, stuff that spikes your insulin, so stuff that's high in refined sugar, it does increase hair loss by overactivating 5-AR, which converts testosterone to DHT. So he is correct on that, actually. Partially correct. Not fully, because he thinks that you can reverse hair loss naturally, that you don't need 5-AR blockers, etc. That's the nuance. But he is correct when he says that modern lifestyles, especially stuff like stress and insulin spikes, they do increase hair loss speed.
This garbage lifestyle where you're told to avoid the sun and there's absolutely nothing to look forward to in your life because
you shouldn't avoid the sun. You should seek the sun, but also wear sunscreen, because sun avoidance is a huge predictor of higher mortality rates. People who are in the sun more often, they live longer, but they still have more skin aging and skin cancer rates. So you want the best of both worlds. You want to seek the sun as much as possible and be outside as much as possible, but you also want to use sunscreen and protect yourself. That way you get the positives without the negatives, and that's the philosophy you should have when it comes to everything else.
Because you're a slave, so you become biochemically destroyed. That's where depression comes from. It's all interconnected. But it all starts with the food pyramid. And the main theory behind meat and animal products being at the least important echelon of the food pyramid is the theory of cholesterol causes heart disease. Complete lie that has been debunked thoroughly multiple times.
False. For example, when we had the 7-country studies, there were a few countries that were basically exceptions to the rule. But then once you take into account confounding variables, the association came back. So some countries, they had higher saturated fat intake, but they also had higher exercise rates. So there are confounding variables. People that exercise more, they die less of heart disease. And once we do isolate confounding variables, for example, in randomized controlled trials or in Mendelian randomization studies, we see that the more LDL cholesterol you have, and the more dietary cholesterol you consume, and saturated fat as well, the higher your rates of heart disease. And saturated fat is the biggest driver, even more so than dietary cholesterol, but they both play an impact.
It is ludicrous to even pretend like cholesterol causes heart disease
False.
because all of your cell membranes are made out of cholesterol.
Yeah, but it's the quantity. Just because something is good, that doesn't mean you should have unlimited amounts of it. Even too much water can kill you. Just because something is healthy in a certain amount, that doesn't mean that you have a green light to have as much as you like. And our cells, they can produce cholesterol anyway. That's why dietary cholesterol is not considered essential. It's a matter of quantity. We don't really need that much LDL for optimized function. We need a quite little amount of it to maximize it. And then more than that, it can clog our arteries. So yeah, it depends on the amount. Just because something is healthy in a certain amount, that doesn't mean you should get as much as you like.
All of your hormones are actually made out of cholesterol.
True. Testosterone and cortisol, they both compete for cholesterol because that's the building block of both of them.
It is their primary building block, especially testosterone. And one thing that's funny about heart disease is that it's a very recent phenomenon. Heart disease barely existed 100, 200 years ago.
False. We have mummified bodies where basically they had heart disease, they had clogged arteries 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. So we have records of people getting heart disease in Egypt and other areas because mummies existed not just in Egypt, but also other parts of the world. But we have records of at least thousands of years ago, people getting heart disease. And of course, it's probably a way older disease than that. It's not a modern thing caused by seed oils. We've been getting heart disease for way longer than that. Back then, people didn't live as long, so right now it's way more common. So that's another factor.
Let alone 1,000 years ago, right? Our ancestors who ate predominantly animal products did not get heart disease, because if it was that problematic, if consuming so much animal product and essentially inverting the food pyramid and actually eating our natural diet, which is the inversion of the pyramid basically, then we would not have survived. All of our ancestors would have died of heart disease before they even made it to our current day and age, right? And this stuff gets...
No, that doesn't make any sense. When people die of heart disease, it's usually in their 50s, 60s, maybe even 70s, stuff like that. They don't die before they're the age of reproduction. So our ancestors, they could reproduce way sooner, even if they got heart disease later. People don't die naturally of heart disease when they're 10. They die in their 50s or 60s, for example. So that argument doesn't make any sense.
It's exacerbated by health gurus like Brian Johnson, who's like on a 100% plant-based diet, just eating vegetable grain sludge every single day. And the guy uses filters and all sorts of tricks.
I think Brian Johnson is underweight. Like, he looks way too skinny. And there are a bunch of things that he does that is not ideal for health. For example, sometimes there's a rat study that shows slightly positive results and then he implements that treatment, which doesn't make any sense, before we even have human randomized trials. So there's a bunch of stuff that he does that's anti-science, so he's not the authority.
Tricks and hair dye to make himself look younger. It's completely ridiculous. I am going to outlive Brian Johnson. I am actually going to look like I'm 25 at 45. 100%.
Nobody knows. We cannot be sure of that.
I say that with the uttermost conviction. And unlike him, I reversed my hair loss naturally, without dutasteride, without finasteride.
Maybe he had like a deficiency in iron, and so eating more meat solved that problem. That can happen, but that's the exception, not the rule. The rule is it's androgenic alopecia, and it's DHT causing the thinning. Some people, they have hair loss because of stress. Others have hair loss because of nutrient deficiencies. Maybe it was his case. But in the vast majority of cases, it's just a DHT problem, and changing your diet is not gonna fix it, probably.
With all of these bizarre little synthetic serums that he's using, none of that. So if he could...
Yeah, but he doesn't use the right stuff. Like, he doesn't even take oral 5-AR inhibitors. He uses a lot of stuff that barely works. He could be way more efficient with his protocols.
Couldn't even do it naturally, then what the fuck does he know about diet and what humans are supposed to consume naturally? Lastly, I want to mention that you are likely deficient in basically every single nutrient and mineral, okay? The daily recommendation...
Yeah, you're probably deficient in a lot of stuff. If you want to know how you can optimize that, you can join my school community, by the way. But yeah, a lot of people are deficient in many minerals, many vitamins. So he is correct on that.
recommended amount is like the bare minimum until you start degenerating and you actually need to go to the hospital. But in order to function optimally,
Yeah, sometimes the recommended amount is the ideal, but other times it's way lower than what you should get. So for example, with vitamin C, the ideal is much higher than the RDI. With vitamin D3, again, the ideal is much higher than the RDI. And yeah, so he's bringing up a good point actually.
in order to be happy, in order to have vitality, in order to wake up every single day with a pole in your pants, then guess what? You need loads of these minerals, you need loads of sunlight, you need loads of cholesterol, you need loads of omega-3 fatty acids, and you're never gonna get that on a diet
Yeah, I do need loads of omega-3 fatty acids, which most people don't get enough.
that is predominantly portions of grains and vegetables. Impossible, not a fucking chance. And
False. I get all the RDIs easily.
the main thing you need to, and the thing you have to understand as well, is that our animal products today are consuming food from demineralized soils, right? They are not nearly as nutrient dense, even if consumed raw, than animals in the wild that are actually eating their proper diet from properly mineralized soils. So this is when certain supplements can help to bridge certain gaps. And this is the main reason why our ancestors could get away with eating animals in the wild and be perfectly healthy, because naturally speaking, they were eating those animals that were eating their natural diet in a mineralized environment, not these dry, shitty soils that these animals grow up consuming their food in. And they got loads of sunlight, they didn't have air pollution, they didn't have all of these different things that are poisoning us on a day-to-day basis. But I digress. Long story short, stop listening to your brain-dead school teachers. Stop listening to all of these health gurus, especially Brian Johnson.
He really hates Brian Johnson.
For the love of God. And most importantly, stop listening to all of the people in your life who have been brainwashed by the same mainstream knowledge that seeks to destroy them in order to make them sick, to take away their vitality so that they become easily controllable slaves.
Unrelated, but I know the people that don't like me, they think I support the mainstream advice, but I eat so differently compared to the average person and compared to the advice that I hear of everyone around me, so I'm not the biggest fan of the ideas that most people believe in when it comes to diet, to be honest.
That become cash cows to the medical establishment. Do your own research.
I think there's nuance. There are, for example, cases where I really dislike Big Pharma, and other cases where I like it. So some drugs are worth it, other drugs are not. It really depends on the side effect profile. Some of them, they have like 2% side effect rates and then 90% positive result rates. And others, they have much lower positive results and much higher side effect rates. So it really depends on the drug. There's a lot of nuance that these types of people often ignore.
Use a little bit of common sense and you will arrive to the same conclusions that I have. If you're still watching, I really appreciate you. And as always, keep ascending.
Alright, I guess that's it. If you watched till the end, thank you so much for watching. And if you want to join this full community, I show everything I eat there and what I eat to reach 100% of all the RDIs. And to reach high testosterone naturally, so if you're curious, you could check it out. If you're still watching, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.